Welcome to the State of Education. So delighted to have you with us today. And I'm also excited to have a good friend of mine, Delegate Chris Head from Virginia. And we're going to talk today about the importance of music. He is a musician. I have some background in music, but we're really going to focus on music as it relates to education and learning and retention and that kind of stuff. And so I'm just honored to have you, Delegate Head. Welcome. Glad to have you on the podcast today.
Well, it's great to be here, Melvin. Thank you very, very much. And I'm not used to Delegate Head with you, so Chris is fine. So
okay, we'll call you Chris then going forward. Awesome. Well, so today as we launch here, I think let's talk a little bit first of all. Tell us a little more about yourself for our audience who don't know you. Tell us about yourself, some of your background, and who are they listening to today?
Sure. Well, I'm Chris Head. I have served in the House of Delegates for the last 12 years in Virginia, representing the 17th district, which is about to disappear with redistricting. We've got new district numbers around. And I will be leaving the House of Delegates at the end of this year. I'm running for state Senate now in a newly formed Senate District 3 that I'm running for. Again, served for the last 12 years. My wife, Betsy, and I own a home care company. We have two offices of that taking care of senior adults, providing in-home care. We don't have facilities. We provide in-home care for that. Prior to being in business, both of us had vocational ministry backgrounds. I also had worked for a large Fortune 100 company for about 10 years prior to that. But before any of that, I was on church staff for several years as a minister of music and youth. Betsy was a campus minister and did student ministry. And so we were both involved in ministry for a number of years. She stayed with that vocationally for somewhat longer than I did. And then we entered into owning our home care company. And all of that's what led to ultimately me serving in the legislature. But we met each other undergraduate at the University of Georgia, and we were both music majors. My degree is in music education. Hers is in music therapy. And having done work in the classroom, having both been musicians, we were both voice majors. Knowing the importance of music and seeing what music does both on an educational standpoint and a therapeutic standpoint has really woven into a lot of what we do with our home care business now, as far as the way we can see things and approach things, because the music is such a powerful influence. And that's, it's something that gets left out a lot of times. And the messaging that comes along through that is so critically important. But that's a little bit of my background. So, and that's sort of what led us to being here today, because that I think we have started talking about that as a vocalist. I've done was asked. I've sung the national anthem in a lot of places, including having the great honor of singing that as a duet with Senator John Cosgrove at Governor Glenn Youngkin's inauguration last year. And so I think that's sort of what started our conversations down this road.
Right.
Among the many other conversations that you and I have had over the years.
Exactly. Well, tell you what, for our sake of thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful for our audience. So, everybody's concerned about what's going on with children, grandchildren, learning retention, and we typically think reading, writing, math. We typically think the importance of history and science and all these kinds of things. And often the arts are kind of left on the sidelines and kind of looked as extra peripheral kind of things. And yet all of these things are important to creating a well-rounded person. You and I know, and many people know, that music itself is a tremendous tool for aiding in learning and helping with retention. So, for example, I mean, who doesn't know the little song A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Exactly.
right? I mean, we learned that was one of the first things we learned as a tool to learning our alphabet. And that's still commonly used. Once you get that down, I mean, you can have a 1-year-old start learning that, singing that, and they know their ABCs. They may not yet know what they mean, but they know their ABCs. And these kinds of things become the foundation blocks to future learning. And you can tie that into mathematical learning. There's so many things that you can tie it into. So talk a little bit about that. Let's start with some of those kind of things, and then we'll branch into other stuff that we've discussed in the past, and we'll kind of dig into a little bit.
Well, you mentioned the one that almost always comes up as the first example that anybody does is teaching your ABCs through music. But you think in terms of the nursery rhymes that you learn as a child, right? And the songs that you learn as a child that stick with you. When you embed information into a song, it sticks into your head. It just burrows down into the core of who you are. The music center in the brain is the first center to develop, and it is the last to deteriorate when you're dealing with someone that has dementia. Again, we work in the senior adult space. The music center of the brain, there are an awful lot of studies that have been done, and there are things that you can see on YouTube of examples where someone is almost catatonic in the dementia that they are in. They are unable, they're completely non-communicative, just slumped over. And yet, by putting a set of headphones on this person and playing music from their childhood or young adult age, all of a sudden, the light comes back on in their eyes. They sit back up and in many cases begin to sing along and then converse. They're not back permanently, that they're back for a moment because that center is so extraordinarily powerful. I mean, it absolutely is. And if you think in terms of what music does as how it affects everything about you. In ancient times, if you were going into battle, and you look in Scripture, where you talk about when Israel would go into battle, who was in the front? The musicians were in the front leading the charge. They were on the front lines, not in the back lines. It stirs the soul. You've never, if you go to a football game and you want to get the crowd rallied up, there's a really important reason that the band has to be there and get people riled up and going. And you get whole crowds. Sometimes it's just a chant, but that is a song if they're singing that. And it rallies everybody around. It moves the soul. It is an extraordinarily powerful influence on everything. From the influence that you have on culture, it's the driving force on that, because that messaging comes along, even if it's not conscious. The messaging that comes inside music is extraordinarily powerful, and it begins to influence what you think, what you say, how you feel, how you respond. It is why the role in Scripture of the Levite was so important, because the Levite prepared everyone's heart for worship, and that was done largely through music and beginning to train that. But there are many things that go along with that from an educational standpoint. Talking on just the secular side, ABC back when I was a kid, back in the early 70s, started their Saturday morning cartoons. They started doing multiplication rock was the first one, and then they did grammar rock, and then they did America rock. And those were little 2-minute cartoons, 3-minute cartoons, shorter than that, that taught various lessons. And the ones that people remember on those, Saturday Night Live did a sketch about it not too many years ago of I'm just a bill, that's I'm only a bill, and I'm standing here on Capitol Hill. All right. People learned the process of legislation through that song, and it burrowed down into who they were. The other one is if you wanted to memorize, and I did this when I was a junior in high school, when I wanted to memorize the preamble to the Constitution, it was with that song. And you could run that song in your head after you learned that and the memorization of the preamble so that you could just rattle off, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice," all of that would just flow out because we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, secure domestic tranquility. That ran through everybody's head. And you could do that and memorize it, and it doesn't go away. And if you think about that even today, the way that you'll memorize stuff, I am amazed at myself now at 60 years old, that my wife and I can be riding along in the car, and if we turn the radio on, turn Sirius XM on to the 70s on 7, and a song can come on that I literally have not heard in 40 years and haven't thought about in 40 years. And suddenly she and I can start singing along, and you will know every word to all the way through because you memorized it way back and it doesn't go away. It's extraordinarily powerful. And it's important for us to understand the power of the music, the way that it can convey things, and to leverage that appropriately, because it's getting leveraged whether we are paying attention to that or not. And it's one of those tools that if we let the enemy use this, I mean, trust me, Satan's going to use whatever he can use to get to our kids, to get to our culture, to get to our people, to get to us. And we need to be aware of that. We also need to be aware of how we can combat things and equip so much better, because the messaging that we want to carry and we want our kids to have and to stand foundational truth. The nice thing about it is foundational truth combated against a foundational lie will always stand, and the lie will collapse as long as you are presenting both of them. But if we let the lies stand up without giving truth through the same medium, that's our fault.
Well, that's so true. And, so we talk about this a lot of times from the standpoint of, school and, of course, as a foundation, we talk about all kinds of educational opportunities, whether it's public school, private school, homeschool, whatever. It's like some work better for others, some are clearly better than others, we believe, but at the end of the day, all of them are viable options, and our goal is to make them all better. But what we also focus on is that parents are really the first educators, and the importance of early childhood development. And sometimes that gets farmed out to kindergartens and stuff, and typically they tend to be fairly good at doing these kind of things. But the importance of doing that at home, if parents understand that value and can incorporate that. Do you have any thoughts on that from particularly the early childhood development side and incorporation of these things in at home? Were there any particular things maybe that you did? I know that was a long time ago, but
well, that I did. But music was always around. With my mother sang to all of us, and I'm the youngest of 5 by a long shot. So I really grew up. My siblings were almost all out of the house before I came along. So a large part of the time it was just me. But no matter, we were always, there was always music around, and it was there, and it was she sang, she whistled. We learned a lot of songs driving down the road. We would pass time without you'd sing to pass the time, and you learned lots and lots of songs. Her father had been was a musician, and he had performed, and he was hired out in he sang in churches and synagogues. He had a small stage career for a while, and he just a lot of the songs that he sang and taught to her, she taught to us, and oh old songs that I know are a part of things that a lot of people don't know because I learned them from my mother. And old folk songs. One that comes to mind, Steamboat Bill. The song, the very first appearance of Mickey Mouse from Disney cartoons was Steamboat Willie, and he is whistling Steamboat Bill. When that's the matter of fact, the whole thing is based on that song. So things that have been around for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. Then when our kids came along, of course, I'm a singer, Betsy's a singer, and we both know the importance of music. We exposed them to music, played music for them, sang to them, and they began to sing at a very, very early age, and continued to do that, and to go on. Matter of fact, both of our daughters. Our son did not want to pursue that. He's incredibly talented, but he just didn't want to pursue that at all. But both the girls got vocal performance degrees undergrad. My middle daughter has just completed her doctorate in her doctorate of musical arts, wow. And is she's an opera singer now, and is it all comes about from planting the seeds early on. Now, what if you don't sing? What if you don't like to sing? What if you can't sing? What if you think you can't sing? Because I will submit that anybody can be taught to do it. People that think they can't just haven't been trained. It's like anything else. The vocal cords are a muscle. You've got to train your ear and your vocal cords to be able to do the same thing. People know that if people know enough that they just say, I can't carry a tune, that means that you can hear a tune. And if you can hear a tune, you can be taught to carry the tune. You may not be great, you may not be a great performer, but you can be taught to. And it doesn't matter if you think you're bad. It doesn't matter, because you also go back. I go back in terms of, again, of what Scripture says about things. He doesn't tell us to make a beautiful sound. He tells us to make a joyful noise. And there's a reason for that, because it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. If you're giving it a shot and starting to expose that, then it helps. But beyond that, you also can use recordings, because there are so many that are available, and they're so easy to get to now more than ever before. Play music, but play the music that's going to be conveying the message. Don't overstimulate your kids, particularly when they're little. Don't go too crazy with it. Make it be simple songs that can get them something that they can latch onto, because in the same way that you are not going to read to them from Tolstoy when they are small, you shouldn't necessarily try to teach something that's overly stimulating with lots of stuff. But you can play symphonic music. You can play church songs. And if you've got messages that you want them to hear, find songs that convey those messages and that convey the lessons that you want them to learn, because it will stick.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to be right back. We take a moment to hear from a sponsor right now. So you were talking about